Joining me now for more on this is Institute of Public Affairs Senior Fellow and Chief Economist Adam Creighton and Menzies Research Centre Senior Fellow Nick Cater. Adam, I'll start with you. That's not everything. Back in 2016, she reposted a comment on X saying, wow, the Turnbull government is backing an openly racist apartheid regime ahead of the US and New Zealand. This was in reference to Israel. And there are an increasing number of Labor MPs and candidates, Adam, who look like they'd be quite comfortable sitting in the Greens.
Yeah, look, certainly that's true. I mean, for me, one of the salient facts from this campaign is just the number of extremists in the Labor Party who are standing for seats that they could actually win. And there's this real strong anti-Israel streak that I never thought really existed in the rank and file of the Labor Party so much. It clearly does. It's very disappointing. But just the other point I'd make is I somewhat agree with the Prime Minister when he says, you know, tweets from a long time ago, we shouldn't focus on them too much. I mean, I'm sure we've all tweeted stupid things in the past or things that we regret. I probably have. And I think it's one of the reasons that quality people don't go into politics is they're just terrified that there's something they've done in the past that will strike them out.
Yeah, that's a good point. But Nick, we're not talking about just a decade ago. There's posts from just a couple of years ago where she's calling Peter Dutton a monster. Now, we hear a lot about being divisive, dehumanising language. That sounds like fairly dehumanising language in my book.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to make excuses for this woman, as Adam seems to be. I'm speaking as a man, of course, with an absolutely clear Facebook and Twitter record, because I hardly use the things. But look, I mean, they are all class, these people, aren't they? They completely lack any originality whatsoever. Out come the same old things, the Nazi tweets, the Hitler stuff, the racist stuff. Does anybody actually take any of this seriously? Does it mean anything to the ordinary voters in the seat of Dickson who will make their decisions based on much more grounded things like the cost of living and the cost of fuel and everything else, and that they know Peter Dutton and his character has been a member for that seat for what, more than 20 years? I think it's all a bit of a sideshow, except as Adam rightly points out, it does give us an insight into the sort of people who are joining the Labor Party now, presumably joining Labor rather than the Greens, because they quite like the idea that they may one day get into government, which is not a luxury you enjoy in the Greens Party. But, you know, they are way out there on the fruitcake fringe, and you can see how Albanese has so easily allowed the party to be dragged to an anti-Israel stance in a quite a horrible manner, probably one of the most disastrous things that have happened under this government.
And it's happening right in his seat when you look at his preferences. We reported last night on the Prime Minister finding himself in a preferencing scandal with Greens candidate Hannah Thomas being listed as number 2 on the PM's How to Vote card, despite the fact that she has blockaded his offers, claimed Israel is guilty of genocide, and has demanded the Prime Minister blacklist the only Jewish state and expel its ambassador from Australia. She's held up signs like this at pro-Palestinian rallies, and The Australian reports today that Hannah Thomas was part of a long-running protest outside Anthony Albanese's electorate office. The protest was labelled appalling by the Prime Minister. He said it has no place in a democracy. Nick, Anthony Albanese refuses to change or even explain this How to Vote card. He has rewarded here a radical activist for her radical activism. It's hard to take his claims seriously about how bad these protests are for democracy when he's put her number 2 on his ticket.
It's hard to take anything that comes out of Anthony Albanese's mouth seriously right now, but I mean, his idea, his attempt at nonchalance, you know, this is nothing to do with me, you know, I don't even know this woman's name. I mean, do you really believe that? That's a very unconvincing story. But he also came out yesterday and said, well, of course, you know, I'm above preferences because I don't need preferences to be elected. I was elected on 53% of the vote last time round, as if preferences are for lesser human beings. But I'll tell you what, he should be careful, because when he was elected to Parliament in 1996, there were 85 MPs in Parliament who didn't need to go to preferences. In the last election, there are only 15. every seat is getting less and less safe. The electorate is very, very volatile. And I think the voters you take for granted are the ones that are going to come around and damage you in the end.
Now, someone who was a Labor senator, they were very proud of her before they chucked her out of the party, Senator Rita Panahi of WA. She's been mocked online for appearing to use AI to come up with a tweet to rile up those on the right and generate some online activity, and it seems like she's forgotten to delete the AI prompt from the post that she ended up sharing on X. Let's have a look at how she apparently asked AI, I don't know if it's ChatGPT, Grok, what she has used here, to write her a post that would trigger right-wing nut jobs. Here's the full tweet as it appeared. Apologies for the confusion. Here's an example of a bait tweet to drive engagement from right-wing nut jobs, RWNJs, for Fatima Payment. Tired of politics as usual, so am I. That's why I'm standing with Australia's voice for climate action, housing and real change. Are you with us? Hashtag Ozpol. So the whole thing went up. Adam, is she genuinely that clueless? Is this some sort of, I don't know, performative art? Is it some sort of a troll? I mean, I do recall a few weeks back she was praising the Iranian regime for its treatment of women. So I don't know, maybe she really is just that clueless.
Well, I think this gets back to my point earlier about the quality of people going into politics. For whatever reason, it has fallen a great deal, and this is just an extraordinary example of incompetence, and not just at a personal level for her, but presumably, it's her Twitter account. But as a senator, she gets 4 to 6 staff paid for by the taxpayer, all on good money, and actually, she probably gets extra personal staff as well. So I don't really know how this got through. They're obviously incompetent as well. Her staff, they should be kind of watching what she's tweeting, or at least overseeing it. So look, it's just a sad indictment of the Australian political system. Just one more.
The only smart thing that they did, her team or herself, whoever's responsible for this, was not deleting, because once you delete, you confirm precisely what's happened. It's an admission of guilt. Nick, I mean, we are laughing at this, we're mocking this, but she's in the Australian Senate, just sitting in the upper house, and you do wonder why Labor selected her. Of all the candidates they had available to them, they were very proud to have a young Muslim woman in a hijab in the Senate, and I wonder if she wasn't wearing a hijab, whether she would have been selected.
Yeah, I mean, she seems unable even to think up a very short insult. She has to get the computers rolling to do one for her. I mean, it's extraordinary. It's not as if it's Shakespeare or anything, is it? It is very, very low-grade stuff, and it just goes to the fact that these are not serious people whatsoever. How they got into the Senate? Well, they got in through preference deals, didn't they? I mean, nobody voted for that many Greens senators straight off. She just slips in on the back of lazy preference deals from Labor and others, and it's an absolute disgrace. I mean, you remember that the description of the Senate as unrepresentative swill? I think it's even more unrepresentative than ever before.
Yes, one of Paul Keating's great lines there. We do miss some of his gems. Now, I wanted to get your thoughts on this piece from Robert Gobleson in the Australian newspaper today on Donald Trump's tariff strategy. He writes that, "Today I deliver controversial but underlying good news. There is an economic justification for what Trump is doing. He is not mad. Behind the Trump tariffs and the country-to-country discussions are serious global economic and defence issues which are rarely discussed. As the economic burdens on America grow with global GDP outpacing American GDP, America is finding it more difficult to underwrite global security. The US wants its defence burden reduced by increased expenditure from those benefiting from the American security umbrella. This includes Australia." Nick, he is stating the absolute obvious there, but it is obvious points that have seemed to be lost on so many commentators. This is something Donald Trump campaigned on. It is something he has spoken about for decades. It should come as no surprise. Now, whether you back this or not, this is very much part of his America First strategy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing Adam's analysis of this. He's a much more accomplished economist than I am, but it seems to me that yes, I mean, as Robert Gottliebsen points out, there are many challenges to the US economy going forward. One is to maintain its position as the reserve currency. Fine, we understand that. But I don't think this blunt instrument of tariffs is going to get there. Yes, we shouldn't be surprised. This is what Trump said from the beginning. We should have taken him seriously, but I'm far from convinced this is the way, or that this sort of cartoony picture that we paint of the blue collar American workers out of a job, been put out of a job by China. It's all too simplistic and one-sided for me. I mean, American consumers, like consumers here, have benefited enormously from cheap Chinese goods that we wouldn't have been able to make in such quantities ourselves. So yeah, this tariffs good, free trade bad. It's certainly not good for Australia, and I'll leave it to Adam to put some economic flesh on the bones on that argument.
Well, economists don't like tariffs, Adam, but the failures of globalisation cannot be overlooked. This is something that J.D. Vance has spoken about extensively, certainly Donald Trump. They have seen American manufacturing decimated, and this notion that you can get developing countries to make things cheaply whilst more advanced countries just come up with the innovation. It hasn't worked out that way. The developing countries very quickly work out how the innovation works, and that, especially when you've got a country like China that just steals the intellectual property, that is a rogue economic superpower now that doesn't play by the rules.
Yeah, look, certainly I think overall I agree with Nick, but you've got to look at the distribution of economic growth over time too, and this is kind of going to your point. So the US has experienced, dramatic GDP per capita growth overall, but amongst certain communities, the communities that vote for Donald Trump, the cheap TVs and radios and and iPhones, they just don't compensate for the loss of dignity from a job. And, it often leads to drug abuse and even death in some cases, and these communities are decimated. They're very angry. Okay, they've got cheap stuff, but actually they'd probably rather more expensive stuff and a job. Yeah. Although I don't think these tariffs will necessarily work, but the US is going to try to bring back some jobs. It'll probably bring back some manufacturing jobs. I don't think it'll bring back many, but let's just wait and see. I mean, the elites have been wrong about pretty much everything over the last 10 years. So they've formed a consensus that this is a disaster. Well, it probably won't be a disaster then if they think it's going to be a disaster. All the focus on the stock market in the media, Trump supporters couldn't care less about the stock market. They don't own any shares. They're poor people. Most people that own stocks vote Democrats. So I don't think that's much of a problem. The one other point that I would make, and I think it's missed, is that I think this is just a revenue-raising exercise to some extent. The only way that the US can reduce its extraordinary deficit is by imposing tariffs, because the Congress is never going to increase taxes. It will not pass a law to increase taxes. But the president, he's got one lever, and that is tariffs that he can unilaterally increase. These tariffs, even at a 10% rate on everything, it's $300 billion a year. It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
So it will help close that gap. And if you're not going to close the gap, well, how else are you going to close the gap? So you've got to think of some other way, whether you cut spending or whether you increase other taxes. But, there will be a financial collapse otherwise. So they have to do something.
They have to do something, and what we're looking at, this massive economic realignment, it is a medium to long-term project, and people are expecting results within days or a week. That is not just reasonable.
Look, the rollout's not been ideal, I must say.
No, and there has been a lot of...
I don't know what's going on.
That's
different ministers say different things, but look, we do have to wait and see, as you say. Your core point is, we're only a few months into this presidency. Let's give it 3 years at least.
Well, we talked about the Trump voters not really being too concerned about the share market fluctuations. No. And something like the bottom 50% in the US only hold around 1% of those shares. So it is not a huge concern. And there's this been representation in the media that, Trump's there for the billionaires and the top end of town. And
complete opposite has been the case.
Absolutely, and that has been the case for several years, where those who are the most affluent are increasingly voting left, and those who are working class, aspirational, are voting right, and we're
Parties
seeing
have
that right
completely
here.
Flipped. They've completely flipped. I don't think they've flipped as much here yet, but
Yeah.
in the US they have completely flipped, basically. And actually the Liberals here have to work out whether they're going to be a working class party or not. I still think they try to have their feet in both camps.
Yes, and I think that's why they're failing. I think that is precisely why they're failing, because you can't be all things to all people. And I think their desperation to win back a few of those teal seats in the affluent inner suburbs has completely, Nick, frustrated their messaging and their ability to come up with policies that clearly differentiate them from Labor, to be bold, to be strong on these policies, because they know some of that rhetoric is not going to be popular in the affluent inner suburbs, but it'll be very popular in the outer suburbs and in regional areas.
Yeah, I mean, the politicians that are going to be successful in this modern era are those that are able to straddle that divide between the university-educated, largely in a metropolitan elite, and ordinary practical people who do other jobs for a living. So, you know, we all know what that divide is. We all know how hard it is, increasingly hard to bridge that divide, because they seem to want quite opposite things in many regards. I think when the chips are down, neither, certainly not Albanese or Dutton have managed to do that. Whether it can be done, I don't know. I'm beginning to doubt whether we end up with a political system here which really has, you know, essentially two parties nominally on the centre-right, like much of Europe does. Who knows where this goes? But right now they're both at historic lows on primary votes, and that's the reason.
Now let's go to the UK, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer has finally admitted that a woman is a biological female. It took a ruling from the UK Supreme Court for him to have enough courage to say this.
Do you believe a trans woman is a woman?
Look, I think the Supreme Court has answered that question.
So you
and I
don't
think
believe a trans woman is a woman?
Look, a woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say.
Nick, he's changed his tune. It wasn't too long ago when he was claiming that some women have a penis and some don't have a cervix, and he was very, very confused when that question was put to him. Now he's very clear. I mean, it seems astonishing that a grown man needs a Supreme Court ruling to know something a child understands.
Why do they overthink all this, overcomplicate it, Rita? I don't get it. This man's got a doctorate in law, I think, from Oxford University, I believe. and you'd have thought that he would have enough knowledge of the world at his age to come to that conclusion about what a woman was long before the Supreme Court had to pass a ruling on it. I don't know whether it's just being a lawyer or whatever it is. I mean, I don't think the guy is stupid. I think they're just so caught up with this narrative and so frightened of their own shadow, so frightened of being criticised by this, you know, quite rabid, mad, radical group of zealots that have been pushing this particular line. That I just don't think they have the courage, do they, to stand up against the trend. And but anyway, thank goodness for the Supreme Court ruling, and thank goodness the Prime Minister of Great Britain has accepted it.
Yes, it's good to see he's accepted it, but I do recall when Peter Dutton was asked this question after that Supreme Court ruling, he kind of dodged it. He really just did not want to talk about it, said it's not an issue for us, it's for the UK. It is an issue for us because the very same narratives, the very same activism and bullying that's happening is happening right here. In fact, I would argue Australia is considerably worse because we really haven't had the debate because our Conservative politicians have been too gutless to take a position on this.
Yeah, the only comments that I'd make there is just firstly, the mere fact the UK Prime Minister is even talking about this sort of stuff just shows where the West is right now, really, and what must China and Russia and, you know, various...
Can you imagine Vladimir Putin being asked this? Can you imagine Vladimir Putin being asked, you know, can women have a penis? I mean, this was a question that has been posed to Keir Starmer in the past.
We've just descended into silliness. And just on Dutton, I'm really surprised he didn't seize on that question and be emphatic, because it's such an easy win politically. 80%,
exactly.
Maybe 90% of people don't think trans women are women.
Yeah.
So why not go with that? Win some votes on cultural issues, which at least don't, you know, they don't cost the budget anything, so go with them.
Well, this is one of the reasons I don't understand why the coalition hasn't really leaned into these so-called culture wars, because because one, they're on solid ground. The majority is with them in just about every one of them. And two, they don't cost billions, and we are facing record debt. We're in a cost of living crisis. So if you make some promises based on values as opposed to spending, I think that's a win-win. Now, before you two go, we're going to have to talk about Prince Harry and the deepening rift with his father, King Charles. This is amid the court case over the removal of police protection for Prince Harry. A royal insider has told US Weekly this has been terrible for Harry's relationship with Charles. Harry blames Charles and thinks he can intervene, but Charles can't. And it just continues Harry's narrative that he's been cast out. Adam, this ginger whinger is just a victim. He's just an endless victim. I mean, he's just got the most, really, he's blessed. He's got a wife, he's got 2 healthy kids, he's got this insane lifestyle based on, I don't know, just the luck of his birth. It's not like he's doing a great deal of work to justify the millions he's earning. And yet all we see from him is endless whinging.
No, look, that is true. I think he's lost a great deal of respect in the UK and around the world. But I must say the more broad point is when I'm asked about the royals on TV, I never really know what to say, and B, it kind of makes me want to be a Republican.
Oh no, God forbid.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
Nick.
I voted for the monarchy back in 1999, my first vote. But these stories, I'm like, oh my God, this family. Sick of hearing about them.
Nick, does it make you feel like a Republican when King Charles or Prince Harry's names are mentioned?
Quite the opposite. When you see the human frailties of the royal family and the people in and around the monarch, you know, it just shows the stability of the system, that it endures all this because it is bigger than the individuals. And I think that the monarch is not above the law. So I think it's a wonderful system. It's lasted a long time. I wish sometimes that some of the members of the royal family would use their profile for better and more positive purposes than this. And but frankly, as a father, I think I just find it tragic that a relationship can break down like this and seemingly be irreparable, apparently because of the foolish behaviour of one person. Yes.
Are you blaming this entirely on Meghan Markle, are you? Because I think Prince Harry, I think, escapes a lot of the blame. This is a man who's 40 years old, who's abandoned his family, who's aired his dirty laundry, who's just behaved appallingly. And because, I don't know, Meghan is seen as more unpleasant than he is, she cops all the blame and he kind of skates through.
I wasn't blaming Meghan. He is, as you say, he's a 40-year-old man. He is responsible for his own actions, and if he's purely driven by his wife, then that's a pathetic excuse.
Adam Creighton, Nick Cater, thank you so much for your time tonight.